know where everyone was going to sit. I wasn't going to assume people's chair location. Did you find if you have a seat?
I'm good. Yep.
You good right here?
Center stage.
Oh, but yeah.
I didn't notice that until the Go ahead. I'll be right back.
Okay, grab some more.
So many years. I don't know if I'm being out there.
Well,
First one. We'll see.
good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. This is the General Plan Update Task Force meeting. It's Monday, November 9th, 2015, 6 p.m. And I'd like to call to order the meeting, and I will call roll. Jill Hoffman.
Present.
Ray Withy.
Yeah, I'm here.
Bill Werner. Here. John McCoy. Here. Danny Castro, that's myself. Lily Whalen.
Here.
And Mary Wagner. Great, everyone is present. We'll have item number 2, any public comment on items not on this agenda. See anyone looking at me for any comments? Not on this agenda? Okay.
Well,
Just
it
congratulations that we are at this point.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank the
I'm
city
excited.
council.
Thank
We
you.
got here.
I think it's really important. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm really excited. I think this is actually the very first start, I think, officially, even though I know the City Council, as well as the Planning Commission, has had some updates on the city's efforts to updating the general plan. This is an initial task of the general plan update. That's an important task, and important that the City Council appointed this committee made up of 2 council members, a planning commissioner, and a historic landmarks board. And what I want to read is the purpose of this general plan update task force. And the purpose is to review the current general plan, which was adopted in 1995, and assess what changes are to be considered, review new legislation governing general plan updates, and identify existing and future topics for discussion in order to set the framework and work program for the general plan update moving forward. At the October 20th City Council meeting, I presented to the City Council the Circulation Element 101 meeting. It was identified as the first element to set off the general plan update. This began with the steering committee's recommendations. The Mauritius Specific Plan Steering Committee had in its strategic assessment report, among other objectives and other policies for moving forward. One was what was important in the report was addressing circulation. City Council agreed in terms of starting the general plan update process was to begin with the circulation element. And so at the October 20th council meeting, that was a direction from the City Council, was for this task force to begin assessing the current circulation element, and with the intent that this would return to the City Council with recommendations of this task force that will also address the budget and what we consider to be amendments that need to occur. So this is a working group. I think the intention is to be somewhat informal in our discussions, because it really is to generate thought and idea. Public comment is welcome. So we can all discuss whether we want to have it somewhat in a controlled fashion, but I think as we continue, we'll have more meetings and perhaps healthy discussions, and we'll want to make sure that the committee voice is heard foremost in how we address public comment. I provided a number of background materials here. One was the City Council report in October 20th, which is the Circulation Element 101 in your packets. Also, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research did a complete streets an update to the general plan for circulation element. And I also included a circulation and parking element that was completed in 1995. That's really the subject of our review here. And also the PowerPoint presentation that was provided on October 20th. And really number 4 of this agenda says, 4B says identify changes to be considered. 4C, identify topics for discussion. And D, establish a work program. So hopefully that helps frame what our purpose is here. And what I would like to hear from the committee also is when we think, and this will be a bit later, but when we think we would be ready to come back to the city council and provide our recommendations. Can we start with any questions?
Well, I'll start with a question. Since I have to leave at 6:45, unfortunately, I'll ask a couple of questions. The first one is, Danny, you've been involved with doing general plans before. Is the notion that we begin with one element of the general?
Yeah, it's awesome. Very.
Is the notion that we begin with one element of the general plan typical of the way general plans are approached?
There is no one way to begin a general plan update. It often is either sparked by a particular issue or decided upon which element is to be the most important to review. As you all know, we did the housing element because we had a time frame in which we had to do that.
The housing element is a different animal anyhow, because
Right.
we're by the state, it has to be reviewed
Has to be
every
done.
5 years or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and my question is this more than anything else, and that is that, it's all very nice that the OPR came out with this streets memorandum, but more importantly, there is a draft that came out this past month from the OAP, which is all of 430 pages long, which is the draft guidelines for the full general plan, which, by the way, there's a workshop in San Francisco on December 4th that you don't want to go to. But that general plan, and there's something important, I think, in what it points out, and I pulled out the circulation element of the draft, and they say very clearly, by statute, the circulation element must correlate directly with the land use element, but also has direct relationships to other elements. So therefore, it seems to me that, if we're not tackling everything at once, which is a monumental kind of thing, this ought to be framed within the approach to the entire general plan. The entire general plan is, in fact, the issue here because it's 20 years old. And so I'm just wondering whether the approach that says we'll look at the circulation element first needs to be kind of tempered with the fact that it's a part of something that has 7 more elements.
I agree. I think that we have to be careful if we are to say, for example, isolate the circulation element and let's just stick to this. I think that, and I recommended that in the city council report, or I made a statement in the city council meeting, was that the land use element has to be directly piggybacking behind this or with it or in tandem, because it's very critical that you don't look at the circulation element and circulation issues in a vacuum, and that it is interrelated to a variety of other issues in the city.
Right.
So it is something that I want to, I think it was the initial task of to be done, but I think it's at some point in our review that we'll want to feed in the other elements of the general plan, particularly land use.
Go ahead. Well, there's just some other things about what the draft points out, and that is that it extends the detail and involvement of the circulation, not just to mobility and roads and so on, but also services as well. So the circulation, which our 1995 general plan or circulation elements are paid for a little attention to,
Right.
in terms of it means sewers, power, everything, how all that stuff circulates and how it relates to the pedestrian, the bicycle, the automobile, the trucks, everything else. And it defines in a whole series of statements all of the elements, and all of the correlations that need to be approached. So from that point of view, when we look at what needs to be done to update our 1995 circulation plan, it's not an update, it's a redo. We're not going to sit there and do what obviously needs to be done, which is to update the data, because data is no longer, go in there and just change the numbers to today rather than then. You can also probably just change a lot of the promises that were made 20 years ago, which ain't happened to the next 20 years. But that's not right either. And I think that the proposed guidelines are very, very clear that proposals have to end up being meaningful proposals, which must also, and I'm going to quote, identify reasonably reliable funding sources throughout. So there's some new approach to the reality of this general plan stuff, circulation. You can't just say, well, we'll have to figure out how to do it. You got to have a good argument for doing it. As I say, and it goes through all of those things that we know about. It's not just good enough to say level of service for intersections is not going to be used anymore, because it can be used. It has to be used in context. And then, anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is that there is not only a need to address the circulation element from the point of view of updating it, it needs to be addressed with new eyes. And those new eyes, just one more step, and that is that I know that there's a number of other cities across the state that are updating their general plans. I just got a notice from the city of Santa Ana, which, admittedly is 330,000 people in 30 square miles. It's interesting, that's 11,000 people per square mile to our 3,500 per square mile. Anyway, I don't know what that means, but they're in the final throes of the circulation element alone. And the first public hearing was in October 2011. So this takes a while.
Just on that, I just want to comment that I don't anticipate, and I'm going to be remain very positive about this. I think that for a city, for Sausalito, I don't anticipate significant change in land use that would dramatically change our circulation patterns and transportation.
True, it's very different.
But it's different, and yeah.
And the rules are written for flat land.
Right.
So we have a very different situation with one road, one thoroughfare. and we have a couple of connectors. And after that, there are trails. Every street in this city is a trail. It's not really a road.
Question.
Sure.
The guidelines that Bill's referring to, are these mandates or is this simply suggestions and guidelines? Are there penalties, repercussions if you don't follow that new book?
No, they're not, no, as far as I understand it, these are guidelines. They are, interestingly enough, and I've not read all 430 pages, but what I have read, it's been done by some very intelligent people. It's a real guideline.
You're talking about the new update.
The
of
new
the-
one, yeah, the draft that's being currently considered as a guideline.
These are.
I mean, you know, the mandates are this absurd collection of political nonsense, you know, AB this and AB that, and AB such and such, all of which are pie in the sky solutions to the world's problems, all because of what.
Well, that's what I'm concerned about is that the top-down planning from Sacramento as opposed to the flexibility to meet your own needs locally.
I understand, and from what I read in the circulation element here, the way it's being drafted, there's a lot of elbow room.
Okay.
There's a lot of room for us to be us rather than Santa Ana or whatever else.
Thank
There
you.
are some, call them mandates, but there are some provisions in the, what do they call that, AB 1358, which is the complete streets. And within that, they say that your general plan should incorporate, your circulation elements should incorporate these policies.
Yeah, I was a
some
little
way or
troubled with
another.
your presentation on October
Right.
20th. When you
Part of that is that, without that, if we were to say we did a general plan and it didn't comply with their set of standards, they could limit or not provide the city with regional or state funding for street infrastructure improvements or other things. So they kind of tie it to that. That's, if you're talking about what Sacramento does, they can do that.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other general thoughts or questions? Because I think this is really what this is
Um,
really, I think, the time to just
Yeah, I'd like to sort of springboard off what Bill has said. There's no question that a general plan, by its very nature, must be holistic. All the elements working together. But you can take that argument forward to the point where you convince yourself never to do anything because it's too big. Therefore, you got to start somewhere, right? And I think we, especially the work that we did, and I don't know, there was a number of folks here who were either directly or indirectly involved in the Friendship Plan Steering Committee, Friendship Specific Plan Steering Committee, to get its name right, in which we said this process we're just about to embark on was the logical next step, right? And I think part of the reason is that we decided, with some then the subsequent discussion at the city council level, that you've got to start somewhere, and because of just literally the issues that are in front of us, transportation generally, bicycles, ferry, buses, the whole works, the whole parking, the whole of that, then circulation was a great place to start. The housing element wasn't, because that, as you rightly point out, was this anomaly in a sense that had to be dealt with because of the really heavily top-down state mandates that required that to be done. So the circulation element seemed to be a great place to start, because it encompassed a lot of things that you're going to do. When, as you know, I grew up in England, and when as kids in school, when you're taught mathematics, you don't actually have a course on algebra. Then next year you go and do a course on trigonometry, and the next year you do a course on geometry or whatever the order is. Then you do pre-calculus, and then if you're not good enough, before you go to college, you want to do calculus. They don't do that. They do a little bit of everything, and it spirals around in degrees of interaction and complexity as you go along. And that's what I see us doing here,
Okay.
if that makes any sense. We're starting off in a place where there's lots of things we need to solve problems on. We might find some low-hanging fruit, in which case we don't worry about finishing the plan, we just go move forward with that low-hanging fruit. But all the time we're using this to start building up and integrating all the elements. And a good place to start, it seems to me, was, let's say land use won't change, but the realities of 2015 onwards of change, such as the circulation element needs to be reviewed, we'll come to some point where maybe we need to bounce back to land use and say, wait a minute, should we do this? But if we start from the perspective of generally land use is reasonably not going to change by any significant degree, I think we can nonetheless make a lot of progress with the circulation to bring it up to today's realities and the next 10, 20 years realities. And if it needs coming back to land use and then the other aspects, the other elements, then so I view it as this sort of iterative sort of approach of building up to our general plan.
Well,
Does that make sense?
No, I think that's absolutely right, but I think we also have to make sure that we have those other elements kind of available to us, so that we start drawing on them and start affecting them, and they affect what we're doing here. Because if we don't, then which tail is going to wag which dog?
Fully agree.
And it's pretty easy to really screw up the dog by wagging the wrong tail.
Right.
I think that's what we've done in the past.
John, Jill, any thoughts?
Yeah, it'd be helpful to also have a copy of the land use section, if we're gonna look at that. I mean, you gave us a copy of the circulation parking, which is really helpful. And I guess, I mean, we want all 7 of them now. Certainly not the housing. I don't want a copy of that. But but the other ones might be short enough that they can fit in that big binder that you gave us. So if we're
That's why I gave you a big
Yeah.
binder.
It fits in a
Started
2-inch
the
binder.
timer.
yeah.
But you
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
up a very good point, and I don't mean to interrupt, but just that we do need to have a good understanding of how everything else fits with this general plan. And that is the other element. This can't be alone. I want to say that another reason why the circulation element is before you also is really to start triggering your thoughts on this, because we do have funding this year. City Council has budgeted an amount, and it was for this task force to begin understanding to what extent we want to update, beginning with the circulation element, and actually do some analysis that we put into the circulation element, which would require, some expert technical traffic consulting analysis. So that's what that is too. So I'm also want to be taking advantage of the time that we can do that and report back to the council.
What's the time frame on that? Do we have to use the funding by any certain period? I mean, I know we allocated it, but
There's not any particular time. I think what we need to do is determine when we think we'll be at a point where we'll report back to the council, and then the full council will then direct whether we do an RFP and what that RFP will be.
You're talking about an RFP for consultants for this.
For consulting, yeah.
And we also, we've seen the problem of going too far without serious public involvement. So, those kinds of things have to be brought into it, as difficult as they may be early. The earlier the better. Workshops, whatever you want to call them. Or at least expose the public to allowing them to have a part in it to begin with.
Well, these are noticed in the,
These particular,
These are, but I'm talking about more.
that's really good.
Look what we have. We have the 4 usual suspects are here.
and I look at this, and this committee to me is identifying issues. It's not actually, to me, is not drafting policies on the general plan, on the circulation element, but to identify and consider what is to be then brought out to a more public forum and get input from the community, is how I see this. But it's to help set the framework, in this, more intimate setting, but then to bring those discussions forward.
Dan, do you know anything about the fact that Pasadena's general plan has renamed the circulation element to the mobility element?
I'm aware of,
Are they, well, anyway, it seems peculiar that they've decided to separate it, or they can.
they can call, there's, I think even here in Marin, that I think the town of Fairfax, or is it, has called it the mobility element.
And the other thing that I think we need to not lose sight of is that I think you're even required to show the relationship with the county transportation plan as well. So we need to know about that.
I have a question.
Funny.
I may not be using the proper formal words here. The point is, if we find there's something, whether it's circulation or land use, that seems like a very good idea, and we all agree that we'd like to move forward with that and implement it, are we hamstrung by not having, do we have to go and get all these other portions and elements in agreement with us and get something passed? In other words, it could drag out one thing, it could drag out for years.
No, I think I often hear that, when we began a general plan update in the city I worked for before, in Sierra Madre, does starting a general plan update necessarily slow down any other pressing matters that need to be done? And you can take those matters and say, oh no, that should be appropriately discussed in the general plan process, or you can say no. If that's a pressing matter, you look at your current general plan. If it appears to be inconsistent with your current general plan, by all means, it can be, whether it's a program or a project or a policy that you feel should be implemented, you can do that. I think I'm answering your, I know you're not being particularly specific on what that is, but things don't have to wait.
To get every other element.
No, if we figure out that we need a heliport down, we can do it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. But I think you have to be careful, because I think sometimes people will, when you begin a general plan update, the community will say, well, that should be done in the context of, you have to be careful of that. That can happen.
Well, as I said earlier, if there's some good low-hanging fruit, you don't need to wait until everything's done. You just pick it and move forward with it, right? And so,
Okay.
and I mean, legally, I think we can update a general plan 4 times a year or some ridiculous number,
Yeah,
right?
you can do an amendment.
Right, well, right. So if for some reason we saw some low-hanging fruit, some really good idea, which wasn't quite consistent with our general plan, but we weren't ready to update the whole general plan, we can just go amend the piece we need to amend.
There's also just
4 times a year.
yeah. There's also just efficiency and time and cost that goes with that, because each amendment would have some level of environmental review, and so you're, in a way, I hate using this word, but you're sort of piecemealing it through. But if we establish, when we're all good and done, and we establish what we think is a total time frame that we want to get this done, and we're going to stick to this time frame, we're going to reach certain milestones throughout it, I think that gives everyone a better idea, and we do that.
I don't remember this, but is sort of the title page of the town's general plan, is there a sort of an overarching mission, goal, or description of what all of those pieces ought to end up creating or maintaining or whatever?
There are, you can, and I've seen in many general plans, a set of visions, visions and principles, overarching principles and vision. That's typically at the very preface and start of the general plan update, in the front page. And sometimes they're one page, they're 5 or 6, you keep it very simple. But from there is where you then get into the more specifics. But it's overarching business vision statement. That alone can take time because you're condensing, your and making sure that it's broad enough to cover all the issues that the entire general plan covers.
And would that again evolve usually in an iterative way? There might be a draft set, but then you start going through things and then it evolves.
It can evolve.
Yeah.
You can also do it at the start. Or the city I worked, they said let's start that first. It kind of bounced around a bit, just because, until they decided I think we need to kind of hone in, and it was a larger advisory committee, but we hone in on our overarching goals and objectives for the future of the city.
I have a question or comment regarding the use of consultants. I didn't follow the Marinship specific plan exercise all the way to the end. I frankly kind of gave up partway because I felt, in my own opinion, the consultants were not too effective. And I'm concerned about the fact that the assumption is you have to have a consultant basically manage or deal with your process somehow. And I realize the world is much more complicated than it was when we on the Planning Commission revised the general plan in the late 1970s by ourselves with no consultants. You can't really do that anymore. And then there was a revision that was done somewhere in the 80s or 90s and had a lot of volunteers involved with it. I think of B. Seiler's role in her committee and stuff in that effort. And so now it's trending to be more of a mix of consultants. It seems to me it's trending to, like, quote, an all-consultant deal, which takes a lot of cost and has issues with public input, I think. So I guess I'm just hopeful that there's a way that the city can have more citizen involvement, save money by having some hybrid activity of volunteer efforts and not just be it staff and consultant driven.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Debbie? Role of consultants and how the world may have changed?
Well, general plans can get very complicated, and the general plans have evolved in new ways of doing things, and the kind
You
of
just heard 400 pages of
439 pages. It's very important to have the conditions and analysis, the existing base of the technical document, the technical information behind all the policies and objectives that you place forward. And that does involve experts to do that. So at minimum, for example, the environmental impact review that has to be done, the documents that have to be done, does require that you have that. So yes, that's when they're involved. But you need to, I think what we will be doing is determining to what extent that we would have their involvement in the management of the general plan. And there's a variety of very effective ways to receive community input. Many tools now, and the new technologies. And they can help with that if we want them to. We also have to assess our current staffing levels. This is a significant effort. I'm very excited to be a part of this general plan update. But I do know how much time it takes, and I do know how much time it takes even for the current staffing we have, and we have to determine, to what extent we want to have it done in-house, and to what extent we would like to have consultant assistance with staff, ensuring that there's quality control with the work that they're doing, and they are in fact helping offset the time it takes to do one. But those, I think we need to all, understand. I can tell you my experience in Sierra Madre, there was very much a reluctance to have any outside assistance write policies of the general plan. And there was this thought that why would anyone who doesn't live here, who doesn't know our community, tell us what to do? And that was just a sentiment, and really it's not, as a planner, that's not the case. It's, I think they help with just a lot of the workings of getting it done. It's a lot of writing that has to occur. But in Sierra Madre, that was the issue, was they didn't want that.
I think you're gonna feel that here.
So what we did is we had we started with a committee group, and they began with wordsmithing the document. It got really, really tedious. I think, I'll just tell you, I think that when you have a general plan update that goes longer than 2 or 3 years, 4 years, people will lose interest. You have to keep the energy, and I think that I really had to, inspire residents to continue. There's often the idea that when it takes longer, it's not going anywhere. So I mean, there's a bit of that I'm concerned with too. It's just really getting it done, and I think that's what we have to assess here is that kind of work program and how we would blend it. I agree, a hybrid approach is the way to do a general plan. You need to have community input. You absolutely need to have community input, and to be involved, and even in writing it, and drafting policies and programs within it. That answers some of your questions.
Thank you.
Adam?
I believe that Danny points in the right direction. We need consultants for the technical aspects of this, not for the policy aspects. This group is familiar with the community, could establish basic principles, but those principles have to be anchored in reality. For example, the personality of this community is that the average household size is 1.2. That's very different from Sierra Madre or Santa Ana or wherever. We also know that the tip generation per household might be different because of the commute pattern of the labor force. And those should be surveyed. We need to understand how we live today, and those figures will affect how many people, how many times come down from the hill to the stores or to the transit stops, how many people just disappear for the whole day and come back after work and not sponsor local establishment very often. So this could be done by a very experienced transportation consultant staff. They could survey households, they could figure out the tip generation. We could then have numbers associated with the residential component, the employment component, with the 3,000 jobs here. Are they really commuting to the same place, or how do they get distributed in a community? And we have figures to work with, and we have a personality, how we want to live, what we prefer and what we don't prefer, and those could help us establish principles. And this group could determine the principles and check it out with the community. The community could say, oh, you're way off, or you're right on. And then we could start working with real figures.
I'm going to excuse myself.
Thank you, Earl.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Tom.
Yes.
Anybody see?
So I nominate Bill's house next time we meet.
Michael.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to remind folks that did you guys mention the transportation action report? There's 3 of us here from the Transportation Action Committee that was part of Managed Sausalito. And there's a report that was published. It's 3/4 inch thick. It's dated 2010. And this was a product of dozens of meetings over a period of 2 years to look at our transportation. It includes recommendations and policies. It includes low-hanging fruit. I think there's a lot of good stuff in here that should get stuck on a shelf. And I think it would be useful, and I don't think it's out of date. Transportation initiatives take a long time to adopt, and this is only 5 years ago. When I say we, I'm speaking Adam and Bonnie and I, who were serving on this.
We were the last Mohicans left.
We hung in there to get it
After
ready.
2 years, we wrapped it up. But we had a committee of about 10 people
And they're listed in here.
with staff support.
I would ask that each member of this task force receive a copy. We have some extras we can pass out, and I ask that you read it. And particularly look at that low-hanging fruit. The other thing I'd like to make a couple suggestions. We talked about overriding principle, or goal, and I think that should come up right up front because the details should serve that overriding principle. And I'd like to suggest that the overriding principle be multimodal. If we just depend on cars, we're just going to traffic. And people are trying to get away from cars more and more, particularly the new generation. And so I'd like you to consider that our new update focuses on multimodal means of moving. And it should be on both land and water because we're a waterfront community. And the more opportunities we get for people to transport in addition to the automobile, the more viable the alternatives become, the more chances they'll take the other modes. If we don't create those opportunities, they won't. It's absolutely basic. And there's a lot of good stuff in this Transportation Action Report that talks about multimodal. And when we talk multimodal, there's private and there's public. And private's obviously cars, bikes, and pedestrian on land anyway. On water, it could be small boats, watercraft, private launches. But you need facilities for those, which we lack. The public's obvious: bus, taxi, shuttles, jitneys. I'd even consider trolleys. We talk about trolleys. And then we all know on water there's ferries, but I think there's also water taxis. And there's a lot of initiatives and a lot of planning that's gone into some of these multimodals. Like if you take bikes, there's the North-South Greenway, which goes from our north end of town to the ferry landing. There's a plan being studied to go from downtown to the Golden Gate Bridge. There's also the ongoing bike program, which is amazing to deal with the biking tourists. There's been a lot of work on pedestrian, shoreline trail, a lot of study on shoreline trail, a lot of study on pathways and steps to bring people down from the hill so they can walk instead of hopping in a car. And how we link all that together, because if they're not continuous routes, they're not effective. And I hope that our long-term vision figures out how to connect the dots, close gaps, and serve all these different modes. The last thing I'd like to emphasize is, I think Bill brought it up, is regional connectivity. We're not an island. There's a lot of people who move through our town. And what are the regional transportation plans that we could become part of? Because we're not isolated. And one of our big problems is the people that pass through, and how do we handle
Then
that?
there is funding, If it's regional, then there is money.
That's right. So it's kind of like those two key focuses: multimodal, land and water, connectivity to the regional planning, that I think have to be our focus. And because so much work went into that in this report that identifies exactly that, I think this would be a good reading material. And if anybody needs a copy, we have some extras.
I'd like one of those.
That's my personal copy, but here's
Yeah, no,
the,
give us that.
okay. Let's start going down.
Thank you, Michael, and I think these are.
It's also digital.
Yeah, I mean, these certainly are resources that I think that this task force, as well as we get into the actual updating of the general plan, there's no reason to reinvent some policies and objectives that have already been thought of. And if you think about it, in 2015, if these are still relevant and practical and measurable, we can do that in this general plan update.
Bill should have.
I also want.
Bicycle, an example of things that have changed, but not drastically, is the bicycles, the tourist bicycles. That has, their impact has increased dramatically in the last 5 years since we did this.
Sure.
And the problems that go along with it.
I just want to also add that I wrote down a few plans that have been done more recently. I think the pedestrian and bike master plan is being updated now, it's being worked on. We passed a climate action plan that has a lot to do with circulation issues. There's the work of Imagine Sausalito and the Transportation Action Plan that you just presented. Also, the Sausalito Age Friendly is updating their master plan right now. So all of these, as it relates to circulation, it's important that we integrate or incorporate these things because they're specific to a particular either segment, but all universal in how we integrate this into the.
It might be helpful to know what the bike committee's been working on. They've been at it for what, over a year and a half, something like that?
Yes.
Maybe they can come and make a presentation
I haven't.
to this group about where they're headed, what they're thinking.
And Danny, you also need to look at the EAC reports from 2010 and 11 on the economic sustainability in town, because you have that one report that was done by the Marin Economic Forum that shows the number of commuters into town, the employment, the business uses, and how that affects traffic patterns. So those are very important resources. There were 3 reports that was done on retail, on business sustainability, and then the jobs creation balance. They talked about hubs of interrelated businesses, that so on, and there's some elements in there that can relate even to circulation.
Okay, thank you. Any other general thoughts, John, to add? Jill?
I have a thought, a couple. So this is our initial planning and we're kind of looking at a roadmap. It looks to me like I'm looking at the slide from your presentation to the city council about the 7 mandatory elements of general plan. And for planning and sort of a roadmap and our goals, it looks to me like it kind of breaks out into 3 main groups, and I'm leaving housing out because we're not going to touch that, are we? Okay. So it looks like, logically, and the land use and circulation are kind of one group, noise and safety, kind of another one, conservation, open space. So we might want to attack it, sort of the update in these 3 groups and just sort of give ourselves sort of, milestones that we want to make. And then also, everybody here in the room has met the challenges of community outreach. And so we might also build that into our sort of roadmap and our plan of, and we might want to talk for about 5 minutes about what we think are the most effective community outreach ways. And maybe if we have a plan of, if we have some, and I'm just throwing things out, but if we have sort of a roadmap plan of our goals if we have 3 different sort of sections we're going to look at logically for land use and circulation, if we want to try to have something together by the end of January, 1st of February, then like quarterly, do we just want to have a recurring sort of public forum on general plan update? And then we can put that out in our various ways of, okay, our quarterly meeting on general plan update is going to be on our sort of group section 1, which is land use and circulation. We'll have an hour presentation. This is where we are. This is where we think we're going to go. Take public comment and then move forward from there. and, or if anybody's got a better idea, I'm perfectly willing, or, perfectly happy to talk about it, but, we've all been part of groups where you plan, and then when you get to implement, there's a,
Why didn't you tell me about that?
Right, yeah. So I think we want to maximize every avenue that we can,
Yes.
and let people know what we're thinking and what we're doing as much as possible, and then to sort of avoid as much as we can that sort of element when we get to the decision-making point. I don't know. I mean, that kind of seems to be a way that people are sort of get informed.
Sure.
We could just reserve Spinnaker like once.
Right, and you have to distinguish between meetings like this, which is a working
Yeah,
group,
right.
where a lot of people don't want to sit through meetings
Uh-huh.
like this, and then one that's an actual presentation and allowing, a larger group of people to come in and comment over a very wide general subject, because that allows you to get the input that you want on some of the things that we either identified from a working group are more key issues.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to get people to come up to speak.
Yeah, I think so. But, or at least voice their concerns
Right.
about something they see and whatever it is we're proposing.
Sure.
So, I don't know, anybody in the room have ideas on that? You guys are all community leaders and
I think
members.
that's a great idea, and your headline is going to be, if you don't come to this meeting, don't complain later.
That'll
help.
The quarterly is a very harsh discipline on this group. Because 3 months go by very quickly. So I would say 3 times a year is better than quarterly. Every 4 months, and that would give this group a more meaningful message. Some accomplishments, more accomplishments than what this group can turn out in 3 months.
That's great.
And the first meeting should be early so that they get the board. They feel that they have been invited to participate, and then they can look forward to the next meeting when this group already has some principles, planning principles, if not policies yet, but principles that can be measured against what sentiments people have. Like Michael stated and recommended the multimodal transportation, which would fly with probably 60% of residents, and the other 40 would have to be sold on it. Why it makes sense. And these are issues that we could work on, or this group can work on. Michael?
Yeah, I want to respond to what Jill's saying. I don't think our outreach has worked in the past. Whatever we've done, I don't think has worked very well, because people don't go to all the committee meetings, and they don't come down to city council, and yeah, they come to some workshops, but then we lose touch with them. And we get the same old people, that all have their own agendas, and we're not really engaging the broad citizens in our town, particularly those that haven't been involved in civic affairs that should be. So I think we should try something else. Mill Valley has an approach where they do a newsletter. I know we have our digital city letter, but I think maybe we might want to get some volunteers to help us with press. And maybe, like Adam says, every 4 months, we actually do a mailing to all the residents, and it's a newsletter about the progress we're making on the general plan. If we don't mail it to people's homes, they're not going to get the Marin scope, they're not going to come to the meetings, they're not going to see the notices, and they're not going to participate. And they'll be uninformed, and we'll not only miss those people, but then they come out of the woodwork all of a sudden when you're about to take action and throw a monkey wrench and things.
But Michael, that's old-fashioned too, but you need to do the whole thing on Facebook. I mean, serious, social media is where it's at today.
Well, for some, that's true. And so what I'm suggesting is, I think we need a separate committee for media outreach. And that there's some people that volunteer their time because they're really good at it. They're good at Facebook. They're good at whatever media gets to people. but we probably should put as much effort into outreach as we do in planning. Or it's just gonna blow up again, you know, and it's the same old people that have an axe to grind. And we need fresh, new thinking, and we need to engage the younger people in town. We need to engage a broader number of people in town. And I don't have the answers, but let's get a committee of experts that know how to communicate with the public really effectively. You know, maybe they got some real experience in the campaign world or something. How do we get a message out to the public effectively? And we should figure that out and implement it. We should, whatever we've been doing in the past isn't working as well as it needs to. My suggestion was a newsletter, because I see Mill Valley do it pretty effectively. And it's just about that topic, the general plan, you know, or maybe there's other methods, I don't know.
What does a newsletter cost us? We just did one, right? The Measure F. How much was that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe close to 5,000.
3,500.
Measure
After marketing, it's about, I remember being about 3,500 or 3,700.
Yeah, it's a few,
Just
it's
for the
thousands.
postcard
Yeah.
that went out about the RVRA,
Yeah.
that was
Alright.
with postage,
Uh-huh.
that was close to 2,500.
Yeah, and you know, we
So
did
it was
that.
over 2,500.
But look
Well,
what
can
we
I
spent.
jump in real quick though, Michael?
Yeah.
Because I think your point is a really good one, and that's something that city staff's been talking about a lot.
Yeah.
And something Adam has really been engaged in trying to figure out ways to reach more of the community. My experience is, no matter what you do, people aren't engaged, and they don't become engaged until it becomes very personal for them. And that's just, unfortunately, the nature of the beast. I think Lily did a really good job with the housing element of getting information out through various media, both with mailers and with...
Consultants did a terrific job too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a real effort of community outreach, whether you agreed or disagreed with the policies and the housing element. The attempt to get the word out to people was really there, but we ended up with the same type of situation where until it came to the city council is when everybody, and it's gonna get adopted, you know, when everybody comes out of the woodwork. But
What is our current subscriber?
to the currents?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Almost 2,000.
2,000. Well, that's very significant. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's a household kind of thing. So that,
Yeah, it's like the
Yeah.
electronic version of a mailer.
that's a good vehicle right there.
And we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out.
And you do a pretty good job on reading.
Party
It's just coming
next
along
door,
really
Lily's been
well.
working
But
on
that's
that.
okay. Next door
Yeah.
can it's not retweeting, but next door you can get word out pretty quickly.
Lily, you
But
looked into
something, but
the
you're limited
city,
by characters too, right?
but the city itself, I don't believe is an entity on Nextdoor, right? We can't, the city can't have a
Public
Nextdoor
safety.
presence as an entity.
So I like, so
Does that
so we
work?
don't belabor this point too much in our first
Sure.
meeting. I like Michael's idea of trying to get together some sort of small group of people to talk about, it's not marketing, but it's PR, it's communications. right?
Communications, yeah.
Outreach.
Well, I think it'd be
So-
interesting to loop in this group that Adam's got at City Hall too. I mean, Lily and Abbott are kind of
Yep.
the brain power behind the outreach.
Yeah.
So that I don't think that this group necessarily wants to recreate something that's already
No, I
in the
don't
works.
think it should be this group. We got another job.
Right.
Well, no, we're talking about how do we get the word out about this item, and I think there are tools in place. We just have to figure out how to use them.
I think we use a shotgun approach, use as many avenues as you can possibly use to get the word out there. You mentioned Facebook, I tried it out a few years ago. I found it disgusting, so I got off of it. But, you know, the younger crowd doesn't get what I got out of it. And so I think that's a great approach for them, but also the Currents, the online newspaper, mailings to their homes, and maybe the Marine Scope too. I think we have to take the, as I said, the
I
shotgun
leave it to
approach
the
on that.
specialists to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Lily, so you guys are working on that anyway? Is that, you and Abbott, is that what Mary just said? Mary just
Yeah.
threw it-
I think you need a
So,
committee though, who's
yeah.
gonna write all that stuff? If you're depending on staff, I'd rather staff be working on helping writing the plan
Yeah.
than dealing with outreach. If we're talking about budget, and I see how much money we spend on consultants, I would like us to take a good chunk of that money and do direct mailings, because I think people read their mail more than anything, would be my guess. And I know it costs money to do
That's what I
direct
was saying.
mailings, but it's worth it. That's my
I
suggestion.
think you're right for a certain segment of population in Sausalito, but it's like, we have probably 4 different sort of segments in town now that different effective communication work
Yeah,
differently.
it's your over 60 crowd who's gonna read it. you know.
Let's
So-
engage a PR company.
Yeah.
Let's talk to some experts about how to effectively, in this day and age, reach out and communicate.
Well, we've got one person right here in town is very active, that's her.
There's some
Cheryl
people-
Pop.
Yeah.
We also,
That's what
you know,
she does.
She needs to
Um,
be in our
Butler
community.
Stein, how do they do it?
there are also general plan consultants who have done this many times in a lot of different cities, and they have a series of ways of communicating.
Okay.
There's programs that have been developed that are easy ways. If you access a computer, there's portals you can go into, and it could be a general plan portal that has updates and it continues, and there's a dialogue that occurs that you're allowed to do, and you can put input in. If you can't, you don't have time to go to a meeting, well, you can just type in your answers and it'll all be generated. So there's a variety of things, I think, and just as you say about talking about experts, I think it's important to make sure that we're doing it the right way
Yeah.
and the most
Right up
effective
front.
way. And whether it is a separate committee that could initiate that, and getting the assistance of a consultant.
The reason why I suggest committees is ongoing. Somebody has to keep it current and write the updates, and it's a big effort. And if we can get a volunteer group to do that, bring in some professionals who actually have PR companies here in this town.
Right.
I think we got the resources, but we need a budget for it. I think that is
Yeah.
really important.
Okay.
So we haven't made any decisions then.
No.
So, but that's good, so we have input, but I lean more toward, let's try, because I'm always conservative with money, that we try to do it with whatever group that we have, whatever we can parcel together and see how it goes for the whatever first meeting we want to set for. And if it's 4 months out, or so we're looking at maybe February or something, February, March timeframe, and we just go at it every way we can kind of think of to communicate and to reach people and say, we're having this meeting on whenever it is we're going to have it. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, there's going to be donuts. It's going to be an hour and a half. It's going to tell you about where we are on section 1, which looks to me it's going to be land use and circulation. You know, come for our presentation, community, we'll have community, public input, and see how it goes.
But
And if-
don't wait 4 months for that. Make that a kickoff meeting. Do that in the first week of January.
and say, this is where we think we're going.
This is what our plan is. We're gonna do.
That is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
So they evolve from the beginning.
okay,
Start a year on the right foot.
okay.
Yeah, I would recommend that just as a kind of kickoff start of the actual general plan.
Just to make everyone aware
Because
that
it,
it's
you know-
happening, if nothing else.
A lot of people just
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
even know what it is.
People will take home the 101 as
You can have a committee sign up at that. One of them could be a PR committee.
David, just in terms of chickens and eggs, you'd want that first come to the full council, correct? As kind of, this is what's happening, that's what we always did before every one of the housing element workshops. I believe, Lily, is that accurate? Come back to say, this is what's coming, and here's the kind of the outline of what would be presented, right? Yeah.
I think also you need to get a little bit more substance, a little bit more further along the road before you have anything to even talk about.
You have to put some structure to
That was
the.
the question I had, is it worth having a full note or going through, telling everyone we're gonna have this meeting, just to tell them that we're gonna be having more meetings, type of thing? Or is it better to wait until, we could do some kind of public outreach that says this is happening. But I don't know that we need to have a workshop with the public until we have something to say, here's at least what we've looked at. And this is some of the issues that we're identifying. What do you see? At that point.
And also
But
just
until we have something
information
that
to
we've
say
actually-
that, this task force is continuing to work to set parameters, set the outline of how we're going to address this general plan update.
Would we do that at a city council meeting though, or would we actually do or would we do the workshop? I mean, I kind of agree with John. We need to somehow let people know this is what we're doing, we're working on this. This is kind of the framework we're gonna do. But I don't wanna try to get everybody in a room if we don't have anything to present,
Sure.
you know?
Well, when we started the
Because that's a
initial,
big effort, trying to get people in a
when
room.
we started the initial Sausalito process, they
Yeah.
did have an invite to the community. Did we do 2 meetings? I can't remember now. It was what, 5, 6 years ago? We did this, more than that, 7 or 8. But it gave the community an opportunity to come in and actually to, if they wanted to participate, to sign up for these various committees. Like transportation started out as buses, boats, and piers. And it evolved, but it, I think it was effective. The conference room, chambers, was stuffed with people.
There was 140 people in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
And there were, you know, okay, so you could take what we're working on here and just bring up the various things we are going to address. And we've got a month or more to kind of put our heads together on this. And not make it a huge day-long yak, but to give them here's what's going on. And we welcome your input, your questions, your ideas, your objections.
Sure.
When did you have it? Was it in the morning, afternoon?
was in the morning.
It was in
Saturday
the morning.
morning.
Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just
Okay.
Saturday morning, and it was
10 o'clock Saturday morning.
It was just basically saying,
That's good.
where do you want to go? What kind of general topics would you like to address? And then it was evolved from there.
This is, it's not dated, unfortunately, but this, when we first kicked
I
it off.
apologize, they're not starboats.
So, outreach is, as we've been discussing, is a very important component. What helps keep the energy going in doing a general plan update, because you need the community support for when you're taking these big policy issues and bringing them forth and establishing them. It's just critical to have that. But I think when you're ready to go to outreach, you also need to make sure that you're framing the issues,
Yeah.
because it's,
Yeah. It grows
and I think
legs.
what this task force is doing is to identify what we want to talk about before we go out and talk about it.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
because we want to also have meaningful input back to us.
Well, that's what my comment was in your kickoff. You formulate that plan, this task force does, and then your kickoff meeting, maybe it's a short meeting, it's an hour, it's 40-minute meeting. And just say, here's what the committee's come up with, this is our plan of action, and kind of a general timeline we're thinking about. We're not going to present you anything about what the outcome's going to be, but here's our process. What do you think about the process? And just let them know, that you're going to be actively involved in this, if you want, as the public. And just let them know, here's what we're going to do.
We can ask them too, how do you want to be informed?
Yeah. That's what I see as
Yeah,
the kickoff.
yeah.
This would be important to have an early meeting. Because you may not reach everybody, but you will reach a number of people who would want to push your cart because they believe in the process.
Kickoff meeting. I think that's really worth discussing on its own. Just how we want to do that. So we talked about a little bit. We started off talking a little bit about the circulation element itself and its relationship to all the other elements of the general plan. And what I understood, I think, is that we cannot just look at the circulation element in a vacuum. We do have to understand how all the other parts work. I'm going to throw this out there. Do you think between now and the next meeting that if we take the time to just understand the other elements of the general plan and then come back and begin to really start looking at how the circulation element and what issues we need to be considered and changed and identify portions of the circulation element that we think need to be brought forward in a bigger discussion? That's one thing. The other thing I heard was, and that's also along with these other plans that were approved in the previous years. There's the Transportation Action Plan in Imagine Sausalito,
Was
which
that
I know.
never approved?
wasn't approved, but yeah, so there's, but it's something that we can all review, you know. The climate action plan, which was, I think, adopted earlier this year.
Which plan is that?
Climate action.
Climate action?
Climate action plan, yeah.
Sounds pretty scary.
Well, what I believe has to be done parallel to this committee educating itself about the elements of the general plan is you have to do staff work to educate this group about changes in the personality of this community. Who lived here 20 years ago when the earlier version of the transportation plan was? How many vehicles did we park downtown? What was the occupancy of the parking spaces? Who came by bicycle, etc., etc.? There has to be an intelligent assessment of the change of the lifestyle in this community. And as Michael pointed out, this is a regional corridor. We are part of a regional transportation system, and we have to accommodate that. We can't just put it in a vacuum tube and channel it through. So we need to understand what that means in terms of vehicle trips, peak and workday trips.
Sure.
So these are things that either you can generate or you need a consultant to generate them.
Good night.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
I also heard, and I'm just doing some bit of a summary of outreach that I think deserves a lot of attention, is how we're going to conduct outreach, and how many times, you know, how often and frequent we do that, and the mechanisms and the methods that we do that. So I think it's worth talking about. You know, do we get a separate subcommittee that focuses on just the PR aspect of this? To what extent do we get some expert advice as well, or do we have local experts that are willing to give us some time? Anything else?
Well, at some point, in order, I think one of the things that we need to get our arms around was, you know, the city council is expecting this group to come back and say, okay, here's our initial thoughts, this is what we're intending to do. Now we need to form a full working group that involves members of the public. Maybe this would be chaired by a member of the public, just like the Marine Ship Steering Committee had more members of the public that were not planning commissioners and city council members and HLB members and the like, right? And it was chaired by a citizen, someone who wasn't any of those folks. But we also need to advise the city council on, okay, well, exactly what's the scope of work here?
Yes.
Exactly what are we going to do? What's the timeline for hiring a consultant? When's the deliverable? You know, this is what the council wants to hear back from this group about how we're actually going to do it. You know, because I think the concept was, it wasn't just this group was going to move forward, it was this group embellished by formal members who were members of the public. And that drives outreach more than anything else. If you've got members, residents here on the committee, not just, you know, us.
What I would ask this committee to do between now and the next meeting is to look at our current circulation element, and I'm happy to give you any other plans that I think that we just discussed tonight.
Isn't it online?
It is online.
City's website.
Yeah, it is online on the city's website, and we've also provided copies. I think we can develop some main topics of discussion that we think need to be definitely addressed in the circulation element. where we think we need to, what policies that are either irrelevant or have been done, or why, and begin to ask the question, why haven't they been done? You know, what's preventing it from being done? And just again identify, because I don't think this committee the intention of this committee is to be the policy committee. It's to identify the issues for future discussion, so that when we do get a broader committee group of the general plan update, that's when this is fully vetted. So I don't want to overwhelm you with that.
But the point is that we're trying to get to that next grouping sooner rather than later, right? This isn't something that we're going to just be, scratching our heads about for the next 6 months about the next group. We want to get the next group,
Right.
or expanded group, like
Yes.
now,
Yes.
So
first of the year, whatever.
let me ask kind of a fundamental question. And Danny, you would know, and Phil, and whoever served on the planning commission would know. Like, are there big glaring problems with the circulation and land use sections of the general plan that are causing problems that are driving a need for an update, or is it just we're kind of at the 20-year mark and hey, we need to sort of review this and see what? Because I just don't have a sense. I honestly just don't.
Just to partly be just a sort of low what at you.
Yeah.
Our current circulation element calls basically for a transit hub.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, those are not the exact words, but it's pretty much one of the policies recognizes the fact that buses, taxis, bikes, actually less bikes, but cars are there in the central transportation hub in the city. That's part of our general plan,
You might want to
which you campaign against.
Yeah,
No,
we want
I mean,
to-
I'm
we
not
want to
necessarily saying pick it on you for
rethink
that
that.
reason, but
Well,
so.
aside from that though, for the high, taking
To
My
day-to-day
level
planning
policy.
projects.
Yeah, I mean,
things
like-
coming through the planning
like
commission.
actual problems with the circulation plan, other than the policy element.
I would say no, and Lily, I don't think, for people who, planners who have to refer back to the general plan all the time, I would say that it's been working for us.
Okay.
Well, and again, you're asking somebody,
Yeah.
yeah.
It- Well, I mean, I don't think that it's specific to the transportation plan element. One aspect of updating this whole thing is the CEQA documentation, because projects, larger projects, not the CADX projects, but as larger projects come through, they can rely on that same CEQA documentation. So having a really robust CEQA document in place that's not from 1995 is going to be beneficial, I think, to the community development department.
So
and the
that's
community.
definitely a portion, like.
But you don't do that until you have the whole thing done.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
okay.
going to be an overall adoption. You're going to have
Right.
a whole new EIR
Right.
and a new plan adopted, overall plan adopted at the same time. But I haven't seen, difficulty making findings that projects are consistent with the general plan. Every project has to be found to be consistent with general plan policies, and I haven't seen anything recently that's been problematic.
Parking is an important part of the circulation plan, because we have automobiles
And we even called it a circulation and parking
and
element.
parking.
I mean,
element.
obviously,
And we kept thinking about the need for long-term parking outside of downtown. For example, we identified locations for potential parking structures for employees who work downtown who don't need their car during the day. And we found that it would free up paying customers who come downtown, who buy things, free up parking, and we wouldn't just occupy our own business opportunities with cars that clog the access to downtown. So this can be reflected in numbers, in number of car spaces, and it can be reflected in the number of dollars the city would benefit from if more customers could park in front of stores rather than employees who feed the meter.
Feed the meter all day.
So this is a common problem in many communities, we are not unique in this respect, but nobody has put their mind to figuring out where to locate off-site parking except for a group who felt that this was a potential benefit. And it could become a part of the thought process of how do we deal with parking in a way that it is more practical and less bad business.
I mean, and going back, Joe, to what you were saying is that it's refocusing. It's taking what we have now and either refocusing or refining our current circulation element.
Okay, all right. I mean, that's fine. That's what I needed to know.
And exploring, I think, David Sudo, I'm going to call you out. You mentioned at the circulation element 101 meeting that
No, we can make one.
people use transportation differently now. We use apps now to get to places. We have different ways of getting. There's Uber, there's Lyft, there's different ways of getting around now that was never even thought of in 1995. That changes the way we, so we want to also forward think about how we want to address transportation and circulation. I thought that was a very good point.
I think it's also impressive how much the old circulation plan predicted where we would be now, and the fact that we pretty much ignored the circulation plan for the last 20 years, and that's why we're where we are now.
Jill, there's also new things we can explore, new policies, new ways of transportation. Water transportation doesn't play that big a role here, except unless you're commuting to the city, but it could. There's ideas out there that we haven't really embodied in our general plan that might move our community further forward. And that's, so I think it could be much more than just refreshing the dates on the plan. I think it could actually have some vision in it. And, for example, Adam, we did come up with places to park remote. There's some really good places that could be considered. I just think there's an opportunity for some vision of predicting where do we want to go in our future and incorporating some new thinking that isn't in the plan right now. And that's why I bring it back to, I recommend that this group write an overriding objective, because it might cause us to look at it in a fresh light. For example, when Chris Gallagher started off with the Marinship study, and she had 20 people that all had completely different points of view. And they spent several months, first thing, coming up with a mission statement. And that mission statement guided all the work that followed, because they could test when they would start debating certain details, they can refer back to, does it serve our mission? And it helped create a consensus that they would have been able to achieve otherwise. Does it serve that overriding objective? And I really encourage that, because I think it'll shape the discussion.
Okay. So I think it seems to me the way forward right now is that what we just talked about was thinking about, our kickoff meeting and thinking about the broader members, and sort of what the task is too. I mean, we're not creating something from nothing. We have a pretty good roadmap that already exists. We need to update it, think about what objectives we want for the future. So I think that's sort of our roadmap forward, right? So
And maybe we can think, you said kickoff, do we want to, in fact, is this the goal of a committee to say, let's think about reaching that kickoff meeting and what we're presenting at that kickoff meeting? So what are the components that we're going to do to kick, what are we going to kick off?
yeah, I think it's an hour-long meeting. It's a donuts on a Saturday morning. Get out, use every means possible for outreach with the least amount of cost. And we identify, this is what we're doing, we're updating our general plan. We see 3 sections of that update. The first one's going to be land use and circulation. Do you want to be involved? And we might want to try to identify community members before that meeting. And say, these are the members so far on the meeting, let us know, or on the committee, let us know if you want to be a part of it. We perceive it to be this amount of work. over the next 10 to 15 years? Is that what
I'd like to bring up a point about,
Excuse me.
having a Scottish background. I'm always rather cost sensitive too.
Thrifty?
But I also think that since we are working on something that is going to affect the city for the next 15 to 20 years, we don't want to restrict ourselves on what's it going to cost us to communicate. Now, I'm not talking about a National Geographic quality communication, but I think we need to be reasonable on that.
I agree with Bonnie. I don't think I would characterize it as the least costly, but the most effective way of, you know, most cost-effective way.
Yeah.
Not
I
the
mean, it's
least
pretty
costly.
I think it's pretty easy to identify the different groups and what works with them. Like if you have school-age kids, then it's going to be next door and it's going to be the outreach to the schools. If you're age-friendly Sausalito, then it's probably going to be a mailer to the home and whatever other methods we have.
Yeah.
So those are the seniors, and those are the ones that are least likely to be involved with Facebook and Twitter and all those
Exactly.
things. But we're getting, look how many babies we have running around this town now that we didn't have even 5 years ago. So we want to get those people more involved with what's going on.
Yep, I agree.
So whatever it takes to get at them. Your age group is much.
Sausalito Village did not exist when the previous planning was done. I think Sausalito Village learned a lot about the community.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
How to serve the older people,
that's right.
what it takes to deliver, and how to organize yourself to be effective. I think they would be an extremely good resource.
Who's that?
Sausalito Village.
Oh, right.
And also the other,
friendly.
Yeah.
yeah, big friend to do it too.
I think you've got to get a little bit further along than, I'm not sure I see the value of a workshop where you bring people together on a Saturday morning, as good as it was, just to repeat Circulation Element 101. We need to have advanced the ball a little bit as to how this is practically going to work over the course of through the next year, rather than just a background.
Yeah, Peter mentioned that before, about
Right.
you presenting the process.
Right, we need, that's right, the process of how we're going to move forward, and that's where we need to put our energy
Two
in the
words,
subsequent meeting.
two words are important: opportunity and benefit.
Right.
And people, when you get their attention and they show up with it because they want a donut, but they also want direction. They want, tell me what you want to hear.
Right, right. Where are you going? Rather than, this is our process, this is where we're gonna, now we want your input, should we change the process? Is it, but
You like
just
it?
don't go in there with a blank slate.
Right.
So do we start setting agenda items with subsequent meetings? Let's spend this evening talking about what the process is going to be. Or let's spend this
Yeah.
evening talking about
Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
what's been itemized or recognized as something that should be.
I think also it wouldn't hurt to get their brains thinking along things too throughout. So this is what we're talking about doing for the plan and the segment of it we're working on right now. It doesn't hurt to throw a couple of teasers out there to get their minds working on, if you want to be participant, but participant in what? The blank wall look. So to get the brains working. I can't come up with any suggestions right now, but I think that helps.
No, I agree. When we get to the point where we're going to do the kickoff, we start doing the outreach in all its various forms. Then we do throw the teasers in there and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What interests them the most?
You're on time. 7:30.
I think I have enough of notes to be able to come up with an agenda for the next meeting. What I will review and focus on, and I'll probably ask Mary and Lily for help, is probably come up with some of the main topics that I think we can then begin to hone in on from what we just discussed tonight. I think this meeting was very, very helpful to kind of get a good introduction and start to all the issues, because the one thing I don't want to do is overwhelm everyone, because this isn't a very overwhelming thing. The general plan update is overwhelming, and you do have to piece it into workable parts so that
Can't swallow the whole banana at once.
Right.
Or how to eat an elephant.
Now,
And if you have any ideas, please contact me, email me, visit me between now, because I think, sometimes the best ideas are later on, and you're like, yeah, so.
we cannot sleep after this
These 3 in the morning.
No.
Great ideas.
Yes, yeah, I do want
Do
to,
I have a mailing address for you?
I'd like to set the next meeting date, if we can, before we all go. And,
So the availability in December for the council chambers, because I think we're gonna head over there to start videotaping it the way that we normally do, is the 8th and the 16th. So one's a Tuesday, one's a Wednesday.
yeah, I know.
You know, I don't remember what it is. I got it.
So of course, this
Cover
is
image.
focusing on
Yeah.
the 4
I've
of
already
you.
broke one out, but this is my
That
second.
bill will have to, I'll communicate it
I
then.
love it.
Jay for the what?
16th.
8th or the 16th. You can do the same time, 6 p.m.
Which one was better? Do we hear?
But we haven't heard yet.
Neutral.
Neutral. Both.
I would like to emphasize one very important advantage of this effort. This was initiated by the city council. It was not a volunteer effort, and that means that you will find people who will be ready to work on committees. Because we worked in the past with the mandate of the city council, but sort of not under the umbrella of the request, and our work was very frustrating because it was not acknowledged by the council.
Was it Imagine Sausalito? Or-
Yes.
Yeah.
And lots
These
of good
reports-
brains were involved there,
You don't know about.
diligently and dedicated people, bringing resources from Marin County, from BCDC, from Metropolitan Transportation Commission, everywhere. And they all were brought to bear in terms of thought, but never in terms of recognition. So it was an extremely painful experience
We worked together for about 5 years on all of this.
from this beginning. So this is positive.
Yes.
I think it's taken on a number of fronts from the various initiatives that were pursued by Imagine Sausalito. I think it's taken the community a good 5 years to digest it and get ready to begin to start working on it. We saw it last year with the Marinship steering committee, which took many of the elements of the Wyman report, right? I think there was a backlash. My personal view is that there was a backlash created by Imagine Sausalito that created the political environment whereby it wasn't capitalized on in the time frame that should, but we're slowly beginning to get used. All that useful information and analysis, recommendations that were put together, the community is sort of slowly ready to start embracing it and looking at it and analyzing it and saying, what do we like, what don't we like? Before, I mean, it just got really did just get put on a shelf.
So I'm excited about it.
I am not going to be a dirty word, hopefully.
Just because there's another week.
Imagine Sausalito
If you
became a
the 8th,
dirty
there's
word.
another week before
Yeah,
that.
it is.
So you're gonna break it so that if there's follow-up information that needs to be.
Oh, hey, what's the date? What's the date? What are we deciding? Let's do the 8th.
Like,
The earlier
I
better.
think
Better.
we might want to keep it open so we can talk.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Good.
And then we can get back to you.
well,
You were, Sean, you were open
now,
about
but we're gonna just put it so we're.
There's no date set yet.
Oh, yeah. Tuesday on the 2nd.
Like,
Send it
Let
me,
us know.
That's fine.
send me a meeting invite.
Yes, no, I will, we will send it to you.
But
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
close the harbor so the whole.
So Lily, you're gonna walk door to door, that we decided? We decided you're gonna walk door to door?
I missed that part of the meeting. Is it on tape?
Where's that Bill? Where's that Bill Warren?
Right.
That's what happens when you leave a meeting early.
It's nice to
Or if
meet
you
you.
don't come.
Yeah, how about that? And one
Good work.
really good one. Good thing for town.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I haven't sent it some, okay, that's.
Why is it so dark?
exactly.
Does anybody wanna do away with daylight